أيها السوريون الشرفاء، أيها الشعب الحر الثائر، 3 سنوات و4 أشهر عندما قال البعض نيابة عنكم الشعب يريد. نعم، الشعب أراد والشعب قرر والشعب نفذ.
3 years and 4 months have passed. Some people said on your behalf that the people want. Yes, the people did want, and the people decided, and the people also implemented. Years have passed since some people raised their voice and cried out for freedom. You were free at this time. You owned your own sovereignty at the time where people surrendered their sovereignty. They spoke to you about democracy, and you practiced democracy in its most beautiful forms. And you chose your constitution and your parliament and your president. And therefore the choice was your choice and the democracy was of your making. They said that the Syrian people are one, so you stood as one against their efforts to divide, and the winds of sedition were not able to strike your hearts and minds, and you said indeed that, and you were one people with one heart. They said that they won't bow down except to God, so you did not bow down to them, nor did you surrender. But you persevered and you held on to your nation and you believed in one God, whereby there is no partnership with other countries, whereby there is no role for oil or the dollars. When they said Allahu Akbar, Allah was greater than them and those who stood with them, because God is with righteousness and righteousness is with the people. Years have passed. During these years they spoke and you acted. They drowned in their own fantasies and you really took real action. I congratulate you on your revolution and your victory, and I congratulate you for your affiliation with Syria. I congratulate Syria, the people who confronted all forms of hegemony and aggression in all the tools which they have in their minds, their ideas and national vigilance. Some took up arms, some also used speech and spoke of righteousness, some with their hearts by their steadfastness and staying despite the threat. I congratulate Syria, the people who confronted and challenged all forms of terrorism by referendums and prevented the aggression and prevented those who own or who were behind this aggression. The steadfastness of the people changed all factors, which changed all realities. The stances changed, and we also had people who backed down from their stances. We had new alliances. Councils were divided. The compass now is clear. The direction of the compass is clear for many of those who didn't have a clear vision, those who were misled, and the ugly faces were uncovered after the mask of freedom and revolution fell. After the true face was uncovered, the killing, the destruction, the eating of hearts and livers and the beheadings. They tried all ugly means. They tried all ugly ways. They pursued all different ways, but they failed. They failed to patient. All previous battles were for the sake of winning this confrontation. Regarding the enmity towards the nation, they were waiting for this stage in order to take away the legitimacy, to show the Syrian people as a weak people who are not able to rule themselves, in order to create justifications for foreign intervention under false pretexts. For our perspective as citizens, the elections were a declaration of real affiliation with the state, which is above affiliation with identity or affiliation with a passport. The elections was our battle to defend sovereignty and legitimacy and national decision-making and the dignity of the people. And the huge participation was a referendum in favor of sovereignty against terrorism in all its forms. It wasn't important for many people who would win. What was important was the elections, and you, with your votes, you defeated the terrorists, and you also defeated the Syrian spies who provided a cover, a political cover for the terrorists, and you also defeated those people who are behind this plot, superpowers and others who work with these superpowers, officials and decision makers who dictate the Syrian refugees, who also had their say and who surprised the whole world and showed the real Syrian picture, the image of Syrians holding on to their decision making and holding on to their sovereignty. The situation, the difficult situation, did not prevent them from participating in these elections. They went out to the streets, participated in these elections. Some of them went out although they were suffering physically and mentally. Others also risked their future despite the fact that they need, and others confronted threats which aimed to prevent them from participating. The Syrians chose their candidate and put their ballot papers in the box. This simple step showed that the Syrians realized that it was not just elections, it was defense of the unity of the state and its sovereignty and its dignity, and this is what made them prevent elections being held in some of these countries, some Arab countries and other countries. This was the stance of the West. How can they say they are defending people who they prevent from electing when they believe that such steps are against their interests? But we thank them because by their ignorance they have increased the enthusiasm of the Syrians instead of decreasing this enthusiasm. The Syrians outside declared by these elections that they are Syrians really, from the bottom of their hearts, and they also proved what we said at the beginning. The main reason behind the Syrians leaving their country is the terrorists of the armed groups and their brutality. So, how can any sane person believe that someone whose state has assaulted him and who left the oppression of the state, how can you believe that such a person would stand with the state with this enthusiasm as we saw from the refugees and the displaced in these elections? How can a citizen who hates his state, as some people assume, how can such a person be capable of being such a difference, being stabbing this extremism, humiliation, and being attached to foreign sides? The elections, the presidential elections for many Syrians was like a bullet where they were firing on the chests of the terrorists and those who support them. Thousands of bullets were fired and hit their targets and stood in the ballot box. A lot of invasions ever since the beginning of history, thousands of years after the French colonialists left, less than 7 decades ago. Syria today is still alive and capable, and nor do we want to be people who surrender. This leads only to the verge of collapse, to the abyss. Our stance back, and many of those people put down their arm with the frameworks of teachings in their religious institutions. We must not forget the important role of media as well. Not the media which speaks in general about corruption or is criticizing or attacking corruption. This doesn't change reality at all. We mean the media which looks for certain cases and which proves with evidence the presence of such cases of corruption and presents this as a complete case and hands it over to the concerned side such as the judiciary in order to follow it up within the framework of fighting corruption. This is the role of the state. It is the quicker role to combat corruption and also administrative reforms and the institutions. However, the most important role and the role which is the main part of fighting corruption is the role of society and the family specifically. In order for us to have a society which is not corrupt, we as mothers and fathers must raise our children in the appropriate way. Let us ask ourselves, could we have seen such corruption and stealing and manipulation and kidnappings and betraying the country and other such practices? Would we have witnessed this if the mothers and fathers of those people had raised their children in the appropriate manner? On the other hand, what about the millions of honourable people, those who work in the public sector and also outside the public sector, hundreds of thousands of young men and women who decided to take up arms and be martyred in defense of the state? What about these civilians who decided to continue with their national duty despite the threats, and the families who stood with steadfastness and stayed in their country despite the very harsh circumstances? What about all of those people? All those people did not do this because they received orders or because of directives from above. They did this because they were raised well, and this led to such honourable people in society. This fundamental part, raising the children, raising the family, this is what makes a civilian abide by the law by conviction, not because he's afraid of punishment. And those who work in the public service are serving the citizen because they want to, not because they want to gain personal benefits. And this makes people realize that he who is stealing from one person or a few people, but when he doesn't pay taxes, he's stealing from millions of people. This is what leads people to help their own fellow citizens, and it prevents others also from being transformed into mercenaries who are used against their nation when any conspiring side wants to use them. And this is what makes all of the other steps which the state will take more effective, much more deeply effective. So let the fight against corruption be our priority in the upcoming era, in the state institutions and in society as a whole. Let us put it as a priority, not just in front of the officials, but also a priority for all of us as individuals, so that every one of us, when we even mention fighting corruption, let him then go and work truly to fight corruption in order to uproot it. Ladies and gentlemen, the countries who stand behind terrorism in Syria tried to destroy all forms of life in the country. So at the same time where we had the killings which targeted all different Syrians from all walks of life without any difference, we saw the destruction of infrastructure which was built for decades. With the blood and sweat of generations of Syria, this targeting of infrastructure was continuing systematically. There is no doubt that this destruction against the state, it targeted every individual, especially when it comes to the life, and this increased the challenges and the concerns. And it also led to the issue of the problem of the people, the property of the people. the life of the people, the ongoing attacks also on the oil fields. The oil fields are one of the most important sources of finance for the state. Also the attacks on the gas fields which provide electricity, the attacks which took place against the electric power stations, also attacks against the electric networks which provide electricity for the provinces. This led to electricity being cut off and led only for a few hours of electricity being provided on a daily basis. Tourism, which flourished in Syria and which was also an important source of income for the state and for the citizens, whether it be inside or outside. We can say that now tourism income is just about zero. The circumstances which we witnessed in the state, the change of priorities of the state, this showed a lot of people who don't have conscience. Also this led such people to abandon, to not pay their bills, to not pay the taxes. All of these problems have piled up to lead to a very difficult economic situation which is being felt by every Syrian citizen. And because the biggest restriction against the economy was the financial economy, in order to heal this problem, we must begin by focusing on retrieving the structure, the buildings, the factories, the roads, the infrastructure, and also other places which were destroyed. This sector is a very widespread sector which includes, its benefits include all people, all walks of life in Syria, and it has a positive impact on the other economic sectors which will not be healthy once again without reconstruction. Yes, gentlemen, rebuilding is the main economic issue in the upcoming phase, and we will focus our efforts on this angle and will simultaneously work on helping and rebuilding the other sectors which will complete the process. And I focus here also on the manufacturing and the other sectors which could also quickly grow and which could lead to job opportunities in a record time. Focusing also on the public sector and the agricultural sector, we also have other two strategic sectors which are the most important sectors in Syria's economy, one of the most important sources of steadfastness. And when we say that reconstruction is the main economic title, this does not mean that we shall wait until the end of the events. We must begin from today, and the state has begun issuing legislations and laws which encourage and facilitate the investment in this sector of reconstruction. And yes, the government has recently ended issuing the laws and legislations for Kfar Sousa in Damascus. This is the first area whereby we will begin reconstruction, and the benefits will include those who own property, own the land. And this doesn't mean when we say they own the land that they are rich people. Most of them are poor people because they weren't able to invest in this land. It will also include contractors, labor workers, the state itself, and especially the local administrative bodies. In a few months, we will distribute these shares, and at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we should begin with reconstruction, and this should spread. The same process should also begin in other Syrian provinces according to these security circumstances. Let us all begin hand with hand to rebuild Syria in order for the race against time to be in favor of reconstruction and not destruction. And as we have proven for the past 3 years, let us prove that the will of the Syrians is many times stronger than the will of the terrorists. Brothers and sisters, on this day we are heading towards a new phase. What distinguishes this phase is consensus on protecting the country and rebuilding the country, ethically and financially as well. What distinguishes this period is that there is consensus on eliminating terrorism and also bringing people back to the right path. At the time where we look towards the future, we are in need of addressing the problems, the bigger problems of the state, and this requires our joint efforts standing shoulder to shoulder in the upcoming period. This means a relationship between the leadership and the people. A leadership doesn't mean that the people are cancelled out and their opinions are not taken into consideration. And it also doesn't mean relying only on the leadership, relying fully on the individuals of the leadership. There must be a reactionary relationship, meaning we go together towards a future if we really want to succeed. So from here, we heard the term sawa, meaning responsibility for all of us as individuals towards the future. Sawa means that together we will rebuild Syria and rebuild what was destroyed, and that we shall continue striking terrorism and going ahead with local reconciliations in all areas in order for no Syrians to remain outside or in refugee camps. And this means that we will fight corruption with laws and with ethics, and we will promote the performance of the institutions by having equal opportunities for all. There is no justification for dealing negatively with the national challenges, and many of the negative aspects which we see in society are a result of a general culture in our minds. We must replace this culture with a culture of taking the initiative and cooperation instead of individual approaches and focusing on individual benefits. Some people might ask, how can we do this if the officials themselves don't respond to our initiatives? This is a correct question to ask, but we cannot generalize this on all. There will always be people who will listen and who will take into consideration, but we must not surrender. We must continue with our attempts in all different ways in order for our voice to be heard, so that we can contribute to the efforts and to the growth and reconstruction and correcting the mistakes. You know very well that the expectations are a lot from this speech, and I know very well that the points which are being raised in the street and the questions being asked are many questions which cannot be answered in one speech. Many of these questions are legitimate. However, the circumstances impose themselves on the ground, and we must pinpoint the priorities. We have a heroic army which is defending the country and which is sacrificing martyrs. And we also have innocent victims. We have innocent victims who are falling daily because of the terrorism in different places. We have people who are kidnapped, people who are missing, who haven't left, and they left behind them families who only have a hope for their return. And we also have those who were displaced and who have no homes, and some of those who paid the price and are no longer able to provide the basic needs for life. There cannot be priorities which are higher than these issues which I mentioned for the current period. So, when we speak about martyrs, when we speak about innocent victims, they are not only numbers. When we speak about a martyr or a victim, people who are killed or martyred, we are speaking about a family. We are talking about a family who lost a son, a mother, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter. When we speak about missing people, our priority must be to look for those people, to know what their fate is. If they are kidnapped, we must know how we can retrieve them. There are people who cannot eat today. We had poverty before the crisis, but it cannot be compared to the poverty which exists now. In order to address all of this, we must focus all our efforts as a society and the country to support our heroic armed forces to achieve all of these goals, to address all these problems. Therefore, we cannot tell the families of the soldiers or the hungry or the wounded that some people are bored or some people have other priorities and have put their priorities above yours. going and putting these priorities above others, putting other priorities above these ones which I mentioned, means not having a realistic vision. Our perseverance prevented the so-called Arab Spring from succeeding. It led to the death of this, but there's no need to extend our condolences. If this spring was a real spring, if it was a real spring, then it would have begun in the backward countries, the backward Arab countries. If the revolutions of the people, aimed to get democracy and justice, then it would have begun with the most backward countries, the most oppressive countries, those countries who were behind all of the hardships, all of the difficulties of the Ummah, behind all of the wars against this Ummah, behind the inappropriate thinking, behind the problems which we witnessed. These countries were the main reason behind Israel's success and its continued presence. What proves this is their current stance towards the Israeli assault on Gaza. Where is their sympathy which they showed towards Syria or the Syrian people as they alleged? Why don't they support Gaza with money and with weapons? Where are their mujahideen? Why didn't they send their mujahideen to defend our people in Palestine? In order to know the answer, we must realize that what is taking place in Gaza today, brothers and sisters, is not separate, is not isolated. Ever since the occupation of Palestine, up until the invasion of Iraq and dividing Sudan and the attempts to divide Iraq which are taking place today, all this represents one complete chain which is planned by Israel and the West. This is something basic, but the implementation is being carried out by the oppressive backward countries in the Arab world. And if we speak about the facts, not theoretically, about the facts, Abdul Aziz bin Rahman al-Faisal, isn't he the one who told Britain that he has no problem to give Palestine to the poor Jewish in 1915? Are you clapping for me or for him? These countries, aren't they the ones who incited the West and Israel in order to wage the 1967 war, which we are still paying the price for, in order to eliminate the Jamal Abdel Nasser trend, which was posing a threat to their thrones at that time? These countries, weren't they the countries who supported Iran during the reign of the Shah? And when the Iranian government decided to become, after the revolution, in support of the Palestinian cause and support the Palestinian people and changed the Israeli embassy to the Palestinian embassy, weren't these countries, weren't they the ones who turned against Iran because Iran took these steps? Didn't these countries support the crimes of the Muslim Brotherhood or the Devil Brotherhood in Syria in the 70s and the 80s against Syria, against the people and the state which didn't do anything against these countries? These countries are the ones who gave a peace initiative, the initiative of Prince Fahd in 1981, and there was a threat: if you don't accept, there would be bloodshed, a lot of blood would be spilt. And when the Palestinians refused, after 1 year we saw the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, and after that we saw the PLO leaving Lebanon, not because they care for the stability of Lebanon, but because they care for Israel. These countries, they themselves, they surprised us in 2002 with an initiative which includes 3 words: normalization in exchange for peace. And it was announced, a peace initiative, in Beirut 2002. It was amended, and Sharon responded. The Israeli Sharon said it's not worth the paper which it was written on, and he then waged a war, and hundreds of Palestinian martyrs fell, especially in Nablus and in Jenin at that time. And when Israel assaulted Lebanon, or when Israel waged its aggression against Lebanon in July in 2006, these countries said, by the Saud family, they said that those people are adventurers, and they began to put pressure on the West and Israel in order for there not to be a ceasefire before the Lebanese resistance is destroyed. Because these countries succeeded in their missions, they were assigned with the mission of spreading chaos under the title of the Arab Spring. And the Arab League leadership, after it gave its role to other Arab countries, the role of the Arab League began to be calling on NATO and imposing a siege on the Arab countries who do not obey dictations. All of these events and the other events which might be less or more important, I'm giving you examples, of course. All of these events and other events are connected to one another for the sake of achieving one goal, in order to eliminate the Palestinian cause. And all the money paid by these countries since their founding was to achieve this goal. And here they are today in Gaza. They are playing the same role which they played in Syria. In Gaza, via the Israeli terrorism, and here in Syria via the terrorism which comes from 83 citizenships. The means differ, but the goal is one, and the master of the plan is one. And this leads us to another important issue, which is that some express or say that they don't care. I mean, some in Syria, some say they don't care for what happens in Gaza because they believe that we have enough problems, enough national issues, and others also say they're glad with what is happening to the Palestinians because some of the Palestinians were not loyal to what Syria gave them for decades. In both cases, this is naive behavior because what is taking place in Syria and the region is related directly to Palestine and to what is taking place in the occupied territories. And this associating ourselves here is like someone who's looking at a fire burning the home of his neighbor and doesn't help extinguishing this fire, believing that it won't come to his house. So he who believes that we can live in security and disassociate ourselves from the Palestinian cause is mistaken. It will remain the central cause, based upon principles and reality and what is imposed by this reality, connecting what is taking place in Syria and in Palestine, especially as we all know that the global and regional policies regarding this region, especially the Arab countries, they are related first and foremost to what is taking place in Palestine. And this requires from us to differentiate clearly between the Palestinian resistive people who we must stand behind and some of those who neglect the favors, the real resistance fighters who we must support, and others who wear the mask of resistance in accordance with their interests. And those who wear the masks of resistance according to their interests in order to enhance their image or strengthen their hold on power. Otherwise, any other approach, deliberately or not, would serve the Israeli goals who want to rip us apart further and to tell us that our crises today are local crises and are isolated. When we believe that our crises are not related to what is taking place in Palestine and are local, then there's no doubt we will take the wrong decisions and the solutions will not be complete, and the result will be failure in addressing any problem which we are witnessing in our countries. Ladies and gentlemen, people like you who fought and showed steadfastness and stayed in a country which was subject to an aggression which we have not seen are a people who deserve appreciation. People who brought back the real meaning of revolution, people who proved that the Syrians live with honor and are martyred with honor, and that their honor and dignity is more valuable to them than life itself, and that their belief in God along with their belief in land and the people and their nation. And although that we have made the big achievements lately in our fight against terrorism, irrespective of this, we will not forget the people also who were beheaded, and we will succeed and spare Syria this terrorism, God willing. And regarding Aleppo, the Aleppo of perseverance, regarding the Aleppo of perseverance and its people of perseverance, we will continue with our efforts until Aleppo is safe, and the daily military operations there and the martyrs who come from all places in Syria who sacrifice for the sake of Aleppo. This shows that Aleppo is in the heart of every Syrian citizen. So what can we say? What can we say? This clearly shows that Aleppo is in the hearts of every citizen. So how can a body work without its heart or liver? So we salute the Syrian Arab army. We salute the generals and the soldiers who spared no efforts in order to defend the nation. We salute the generals and the soldiers who spared no efforts in order to defend the nation, beginning with themselves, and which didn't end with their families who they left behind with the hope of returning safely. We salute the National Defense Councils and all the young men and women We salute the National Defense Committees and all the young men and women who took up arms to defend the dignity of their country and to defend its honor. They helped and they assisted the Syrian army in many areas in Syria. And we salute more and more the people who took in and supported the Syrian army, which was very important for the army achieving victory. Let us not forget those sons of the Lebanese resistance. Let us not forget the sons of the Lebanese resistance, the heroic sons who stood side by side with the heroes of our army and fought honourable battles together on both sides of the border and also sacrificed martyrs in order to defend the axis of resistance. I salute them and all the families of these martyrs. We salute them and all the families of the martyrs who returned the favour, and considered it a duty to stand with Syria, just like it's a duty similar to the duty of defending South Lebanon. We also thank Iran, Russia and China. These countries who respected the decision of the Syrian people and their will for 3 years and really defended the UN treaties in respecting the sovereignty of countries and not intervening in their internal affairs. Honourable Syrian people, the challenges are big and the missions are also huge. Our confidence in ourselves also doesn't mean that we should take issues lightly. We have a strong will, and with our will we can transform this into a chance. And if the price we paid was a high price, let our achievements be at the same level of this high price, as long as we have the will. The upcoming phase has begun, the new phase has begun, and we are ready. Syria deserves from us all efforts, and we will spare no efforts, as I said, as our heroes didn't spare anything from their blood and their souls. I will remain the individual who belongs to you, lives amongst you, takes your opinion into account, and also draws inspiration from your vigilance. I will remain the individual I will remain the individual who belongs to you, who lives amongst you, and who takes your opinion into account and also draws inspiration from your vigilance. Together with you, Syria will stand high, will remain. Steadfastness will not be defeated by the foreigners, and we shall remain an impossible target to be defeated. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that was live from the Syrian capital, Damascus, as Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has been sworn in for a third tenure as president. He opened his statements saying that the people of Syria have decided and have implemented, alluding to the elections held last month in Syria, where Bashar al-Assad won a landslide victory of 88.7% of the votes, if I'm correct. He also stated that the elections were a battle to defend the sovereignty and the dignity of the people of Syria, and it was a bullet to the chest of the terrorists. He also condemned the Israeli aggression, said that Syria will continue